What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. We're rocking and rolling on a Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. Oregon football is just 11 days away, and the high school football season gets underway here in Southern California. I'm doing a little bit of a write-up right now, previewing the two games that I will be covering this week: Mater Dei versus Corona Centennial, and Junipero Serra and Gardena against the Orange Lutheran Lancers. We're doing a little bit of an Oregon football and recruiting mailbag today. It is the weekly mailbag with my guy Travis Rook-Lay. So we got some questions to get into, and if you guys are here in the live chat, go ahead and drop us some in the live chat, and we'll do our best to mix them in and get them answered. With all that said, Travis, man, how are you?
Pretty good, man. Good to be back. Apologize to the live viewers out there. Totally my fault. Got the dreaded get home and automatic computer restart. So thanks to all those that are joining us, and we'll do our best to get to the questions. Going to try to get through. We got a ton of questions this week, so going to try to get through a few more than usual, some rapid fire stuff. But just excited to get the season rolling and talking some ball.
Absolutely. It is time to get back to some football. I saw all these tweets. One of my favorite ones was it was the meme where the guy is crying with his groomsmen at the wedding, where he like turns around. It's definitely like a first look, but it says there's football on every Saturday until 2025. So everybody's excited. The excitement's in the air for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like I can say this because I know that my girlfriend will not be listening to this, but I definitely gave her this weekend as kind of the last hurrah before ball starts. So I can't say I'll be watching much of that FSU Georgia Tech game, but starting August 31st, those weekends are booked up for a long time.
Yeah, it's tough. I saw another post. It was like quality time's over, football season's back. So I know my girlfriend's not stoked about the football season getting underway because it's gonna mean more craziness in my world. But I'm very excited to just get back on the field and see some of these really talented players in action, and then hopefully make my way out to Eugene for that Ohio State game. I still need to buy my flight. I keep saying that, but I actually do need to buy it. But I think I'm going to go from Santa Ana to Portland, which is a little bit cheaper. So love that.
Is that the one you got circled this year?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely want to come up and work that one as a reporter, and then come up ideally with my girlfriend and hang out with some of my friends, my people in Eugene, and just go as a fan in another game. But I don't know which one yet.
I'm going to see you down in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, I'll be at the UCLA game for sure. But as far as another Oregon home game, I don't know which one just yet.
Yeah, I keep thinking that I'm going to get to the age where I'll stop going to road games, and then how can you turn down Los Angeles, Madison, and Ann Arbor? So the bills are adding up this fall.
I feel that. Well, should we get into some of these questions?
Let's do it. Yeah. So, like I said, I think we're just going to start with kind of some quick hitters. A lot of questions on here, and since we're talking about obviously season starting up, let's just start with this first question from the board. What are you thinking for the Idaho game? Score prediction. We've got Tex Duck saying 59-6.
Dang. Yeah, that's not a close game. I don't think anybody's expecting a close game for Oregon's season opener. I think that I could definitely see Oregon hanging 60 on the Vandals. I'll just go something like 66-10. We'll go with that.
I've got 63-7.
All right. Yeah, we'll definitely have some score predictions over on Scoop Duck when the season comes around. But as of right now, on August 20th, I'm just going to go with that off the top.
All right, next one. I feel like we might have the same answer here, but we can get a little bit into why. Freshman DB most likely to burn his red shirt.
Ooh. See, I think if you would have asked me this question a couple weeks ago, I think I would have said Aaron Flowers. But based on some of my recent thoughts and conversations with people, I think I'm going to go with Dakota Fields, even though it's a pretty tightly contested and just loaded cornerback room. I keep hearing a lot of really good things about Dakota Fields, the true freshman from Gardena Serra in Southern California. So I think that he's been doing some special things since he got there. He's really locked in. I think he's getting the coaching that he was maybe lacking a little bit at the high school level. And I think that he's probably just changed his mindset a little bit going into that year.
Yeah, I think you'll see Dakota. I think you'll see Iffy, Peyton Woodyard, and Aaron Flowers get a lot of runs. So I think any of those are good picks. I do want to add, I think I think Duck fans haven't exactly like adjusted to the new reality that is when you're like recruiting the caliber of player we are now, the like red shirt decision is a lot different. And I mean that in terms of like a lot of these guys are only going to be on campus for 3 years with the talent you're recruiting. If you look at the rosters of like the Georgia and Alabamas of the world, like you don't get guys that are high 4-star, 5-star kids staying it for 5 years anymore. So I think you'll find the staff start to operate under the mindset, which they've already kind of begun of like, this guy, we've got this guy for X amount of years. Let's just have him play. And I think you've seen that the last couple of years. So I think with Flowers, with Dakota, with these guys that are like high upside, like really talented guys coming in, I think more and more you'll see the trend be like, let's throw them into the fire. Let's get them reps. Let's have them ready for the start of the year. Versus a few years back, you may be thinking like developmentally, we want to maximize this guy. Let's try to like preserve his red shirt. So I just think you'll see that shift start to happen more and more as we start to recruit at a higher level.
And to that point, Travis, I think another thing with that, the caliber of player that Oregon's recruiting, you're just seeing them recruit guys that are naturally going to be able to see the field earlier and earlier. And that may not mean a starting role, especially for a DB. I think that's really difficult to do. We just haven't seen it very much at Oregon. I think the guy that I kind of think of that played a lot right out of the gate in recent years was maybe Thomas Graham or Michael Wright, but Michael Wright kind of regressed each year. If I'm being totally honest, I think that was a unique situation. You also had some staff turnover at the cornerback spot, but Thomas Graham was thrown into the fire. I think that was very much not a situation of, hey, this is our best guy and he is pushing the vets. It's like we don't have that many quality options, so I think you're the best we got right now, and I think that's a big part of how much Oregon's defensive back recruiting has changed over the years, because now you're at a spot where you have a bunch of really proven veterans from other schools at times, right? With someone like Jabbar Muhammad coming in from Washington or Brendan Johnson coming in from Duke. A man of few words, I might add. He spoke with the media for the first time in fall camp yesterday, and I was transcribing that interview, and it was just very much, yep, I'm playing nickel. Are you in the dime a lot? We're in the dime a lot. So not a whole lot from him, but he's someone that I'm really excited about. And then the other point on that, Travis, is that I think we'll see a lot of these guys also have some roles on special teams. And that's something that I think is a bit of a luxury, right? When you can have a former All-American recruit that is out there and his biggest role is on special teams, I think that that's pretty unique and a fortunate spot to be in if you're this Oregon staff, because special teams don't seem like that big of a deal until you see someone that forces a fumble on a punt or has an onside recovery or a special teams kickoff punt return to the house, something like that. So I'm pretty excited to see just who's going to be on the field.
For sure. And I think that thankfully, I think the schedule sets up in a way, like we mentioned before, where you got, 5 games in a bye week before Ohio State. So you really got, obviously no gimmies these days. And I think Lanning's the last guy in the world that's going to assume a gimme or take his foot off the gas. But with those 5 games, you got a little bit of a lead up to where hopefully by October 12th, you've got that defensive backfield in a spot where guys have gotten experience and you can really tell kind of who's risen to the top. And if Aaron Flowers or any other guys you mentioned needs a little bit extra time, okay, then you can preserve a red shirt for him. But I assume we'll know by UCLA, Michigan State leading into Ohio State, like who are really going to be the guys back there.
And this is just, we can maybe wrap up the red shirt discussion with this question from Andy. Will red shirts happen less often with the talent that is being acquired? I think it's yes and no. A lot of people seem to look at the stars or look at the ranking, and it's easy to get excited, right? I want to see these guys play early too, especially since I covered a lot of them in the high school rankings and during their high school careers. But just because this guy or that guy is really highly rated doesn't mean he's going to get rushed onto the field. And I think that some of these decisions, like you had, I think, mentioned, may not come until later on in the year when you're into the meat of the schedule or you're in the playoff. And it's like, well, shoot, we wanted to redshirt this guy, but we're in the playoff right now. It's win or go home. So I think at that point, you're not too worried about a redshirt decision, but I don't think that that's a super big priority for Lanning and the coaches right now.
And I think that, like, to that question specifically, I think that the new like roster limits and scholarship limits will play a role in that too. I mean, I think about, I'm not the first person to say this, and I definitely was not the one to think of it either, but I think I certainly agree with it. This idea of, I think you'll see some of the smarter and more well-resourced staff like stack certain developmental positions. So I think about offensive line. Like, it would make a lot of sense to me to double the amount of offensive linemen you're taking right now and probably redshirt a good chunk of them. Like, you're looking at taking a few projects on guys that are going to grow into position, guys that are going to grow into their bodies in different ways. So I think that there are times to do that and positions to do that. Wide receiver, DB, stuff like that, I don't think so. But I think when you look at I think when you look at offensive line, like, it makes sense to bring in bring in 10 guys a year. You have the option to do it now. Redshirt a chunk of them that you can, and see after a year who's good, and who's developing in their body, who's taking on the system. So I think you kind of have to do it based upon the position and like what has proven to be successful at that spot.
And if you didn't know, Travis, if you're good enough, you're old enough.
Hey,
That's a Dan Lanning-ism that we hear every season at multiple parts of the season, but it's true. It's definitely true. I think that Lanning and the staff have not been shy about playing some of these young guys if they've proven that they can have what it takes to see the field early. So I'm all for it. What's the
yeah,
what's the next question we got?
for sure. Obviously, a little bit of scuttle this week with a couple injuries on the offensive line. What's your most likely IOL lineup with Bedford out, Dave Iuli, Strother, or someone else? I've seen it floated that Poncho could move to guard for non-conference, but that seems like it would be bad for overall continuity.
Yeah, the offensive line, I think that's been one of the interesting developments with the Bedford injury is that it doesn't sound like the staff is dead set on starting Poncho at center, which I think is probably a good thing just to give yourself options. You have to remember before the Fiesta Bowl where he got his first start at center, he was playing a lot of guard and rotating in quite a bit, but I think that it's good for the staff to have Poncho in a situation where he's gotten quality snaps as a true freshman and he's been at guard and he has that position flexibility. It also sounds like Charlie Pickard is a guy maybe worth a mention at that center spot. And there were some reports out of Eugene that he was repping at center with the offensive line. But I think interior offensive line, you're probably looking at some combo of Marcus Harper at left guard. I don't think that they want to move him from left guard unless they need to. He is also someone that has a lot of experience snapping the ball, not necessarily in game situations during his Oregon career, but he's always kind of been one of those guys that has been in the back pocket of the staff dating back to the Mario Cristobal era. So we know that he's a guy that's capable of snapping, but I don't think you want him to snap unless you really need to. So I think that's probably part of the reason that we're seeing Pickard getting some of these reps at center. Although I would think that he's probably in the 2 or 3 deep at center, maybe regardless of if there's an injury along the offensive line. But I think you're looking at some combo of Harper at left guard, Poncho or Pickard, and then Struthers at one of the right guard spot maybe, or Dave Iuli if he comes back from injury. It doesn't sound like he's at 100% just yet based on Lanning's recent comments this week.
Yeah, totally agree. I think you did a good job summarizing it. I mean, I think that what you've seen over the last 2 years, through, different offensive line coaches, is that Lanning clearly likes the ability to like mix and match kind of early on this season, build some depth, try guys out at different spots. I think you've seen even within like early season games, even building in the middle of the year, like guys rotating in, like you mentioned, Poncho last year was playing guard, well into Pac-12 play, rotating series and different things. So I think, once again, not to like bang on this drum, but I think you'll see the staff use that early slate to get some reps for some of the younger guys, rotate guys in. I bet you'll see. I mean, we all remember back to the freaking, what was it, 2015 Alamo Bowl. We couldn't snap the ball with our backup center. So I think you'll see this staff is so meticulous in every single detailed way. And that's another way where I think you're just going to see us use that opportunity to try different guys, walk on or not, get them reps. And hopefully Bedford and Iuli, I would think, are targeting the start of that Big Ten conference play to be back in the fold, and you got a couple weeks to get them ready.
My last comment here on the offensive line depth with this question, Travis, and then maybe we can keep it rolling with our next one. I think that Lanning and maybe more specifically Alik Terry and Will Stein have found this good balance of knowing when to, hey, this game's in hand. Let's get a bunch of guys in there, get them a bunch of reps versus, hey, this game's still pretty close. Maybe we shouldn't have a revolving door of players in the trenches, because that's kind of what we saw at times under the Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal offensive line, which were some really good offensive lines. But when we saw some of those bumps in the road, some of those hiccups, it seemed like it coincided to some degree with that lack of chemistry and continuity. And we know that the coaches have really been harping on position flex and just repping at a bunch of different spots. I think every team in the country does that. It's not something new and innovative on Oregon's part, but I think it's important to be able to have that flexibility to bring in a bunch of guys in, but at the same time say, hey, this is our best group. Let's stick to it because it's working well. And I think that's what Alik Terry did last year.
For sure. And I think the other side of that too, which I think the staff did a good job last year, but gosh, it's driven me crazy for years, is I cannot stand when a coach will put in our backup QB and then put in a bunch of 2s and 3s with him and just like hand the ball off. And you can see why we struggled for so many years, like developing backups. So the one thing I loved last year was you saw Ty Thompson now with not a ton of success at times, but you saw him out there like with the ones. Ty would come in, play a couple of series with the ones, and then you'd rotate in other guys. I just think like with certain spots, QB by far number one, like give the guy an opportunity. You never know when your guy's going to go down. So give your backup an opportunity to play with the guys he's going to play with, develop some continuity with them, play with the guys that are ones for a reason. And I think thankfully we're in a good spot with Dante and Novosad, where like we don't have to, fear the world every time Gabriel gets tackled.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's a way to get your next quarterback some confidence is by, just because the number 2 quarterback's in there doesn't mean you have to have the number 2 line or number 3 line, because that's not going to be a good way to build confidence for that passer. So I like that point a lot.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, let's move on. A couple of others from Scoop Duck, then we'll pop over some questions from Twitter and probably some live questions here at the end. When you look at this team, what national award do you think is most likely for a Duck player, group, or coach to win this season, and why?
Ooh, that is a really good one. I'm gonna go with a couple different answers just because it's hard to harp on just one. I think one that really gets me excited is Jabbar Muhammad with the Jim Thorpe Award. I think with the combination of talent that Oregon has, talent and experience all throughout that defense, I think that is an award that could be pretty realistic with everything that he's already done in his college career and this move over to the Big Ten, where you're going to face some really good wide receivers throughout the year. I think that he has an opportunity to really solidify himself as one of the best defensive backs and one of the best cornerbacks in the country. And I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because he's not the tallest cornerback. He's not the fastest cornerback, but that dude's a technician. And everything I've been hearing about him coming out of some people close to the program are saying that he is just a stud. And the expectations are super high for him. So as far as a specific player, I think I want to go with Jabbar Muhammad and the Jim Thorpe, but maybe you could make the case for Will Stein with the Art Briles Award as one of the top coordinators, right? Or is that assistants? Is that just general assistants?
Yeah, I think. Gosh,
I can't remember, but I think
call
he
it
could be in the
assistant.
mix.
I like the pick. Yeah, I mean, my first thought was like I'm a homer for saying Gabriel Heisman, but then I'm thinking like I'm going through the odds in my head, and I'm like, I feel like that's actually probably odds wise the most likely pick. Um, I mean, every odds breakdown I've seen recently has him as favorite, co-favorite with Carson Beck. I mean, I think if we have the season that we want and that we expect, the numbers he's probably going to put up. I think you're looking at Dylan Gabriel. I think the other option that popped into my mind, and I think it comes down to kind of who's getting those. Unfortunately, I think a lot of these awards come down to like touchdowns, which aren't that indicative of anything. I think if you see Dylan Gabriel rushing the ball in 10 times from inside the 10, I'm inclined to say him for Heisman. I think if you see Jordan James get those carries, I'm like, man, could Jordan James make a case for the Doak Walker? So
That was the other one that I was thinking about.
I think offensively, kind of depending on the breakdown and how often are these games, games in the fourth quarter? Hopefully not many of them. I mean, it's the thing that still to this day drives me crazy about last year with Jaden Daniels. I mean, that guy's playing with 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter against FCS teams.
That shouldn't mean anything. That shouldn't carry any weight.
Drives me crazy. But heck, when you're 9-3 and you're out of the playoff picture in October, like LSU was, that's all you got to carry. So I'm still frustrated by that and wish Bo was able to close it out against Washington. But like I said earlier, I just think unfortunately, with a lot of those awards, it'll come down to, how many times are Gabriel, Jordan James, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, are they playing in fourth quarters, or are they out in the middle of the third and suppressing their numbers a little bit?
And the thing that's also interesting and kind of crazy with this award discussion, Travis, I don't think that we're going to see Oregon sweep these awards, right? That's probably unrealistic, but they have somebody that I think could at least be worth a mention or in the mix for a majority of these awards, right? We talked about Jordan James with the Doak Walker. The offensive line was a finalist for the Joe Moore Award in Malik Terry's first year as the offensive line coach at Oregon. His second year ever leading an offensive line room, with the only other one being at Hawaii, I believe. And then we have Terrence Ferguson looking to have a strong senior year to cap off his college career. I think he's going to be a dangerous weapon in that offense. And then we have Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson at receiver that I think they both landed on the Blitnikov Award watch list. I can't remember. I know Tez did, but those are two big names at the wide receiver room. Justin Jacobs, Jeffrey Bossa at linebacker for some potential butt kiss. I mean, the stories have come out all throughout the offseason, and it's a little bit hard to keep track of all of them. But the depth and the talent that they have, I think that was just a point that I wanted to make.
For sure. Yep, 100%. Last one from over at Scoop Duck. Obviously, I think both of us need to be kind of tight-lipped on some level in terms of what we've heard, but I've got a couple things. Any just like general stuff or things you want to share coming out of the second scrimmage? I know a lot of fans are obviously curious about that.
Yeah, I think Justin might have discussed part of it, but one of the recent things that I was hearing coming out of that second scrimmage was that Amari Washington might have been one of the best defensive linemen on the field, regardless
Yep.
of which team you were looking at. And we know, of course, they like to mix and match the starters and the backups on both sides. But I think that's a really, really good development, because a lot of the attention is probably going to be on Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell, and deservedly so. But those are two guys that transferred in. And I think that there's probably some fans out there that want to hear a little bit more about the homegrown guys, the guys that they recruited through high school and are working on developing. And that was one of the guys that I heard a lot about when he was coming out of high school. I literally remember being in San Antonio at the Adidas All-American Bowl award ceremonies, and I was sitting in with his high school coach, that the name is escaping me right now, unfortunately, but he was kind of telling me, like, paraphrasing here, but he was basically like, man, Amari Washington should be here. Like, he checks all the boxes. He's super athletic. He's incredibly dominant. So with him being one of the headliner signees in that 2023 class, or maybe someone that kind of got swept under the rug a little bit or overlooked when you have a guy like Mateo as a big name, I think that Amari Washington, I'm looking for him to have a significant year.
For sure. And I would encourage people, if they haven't, like you mentioned, I mean, Justin put out a long piece. I think it was yesterday, almost touching on every position group and some of the things he's been hearing coming out of that. So I don't think either of us want to steal that shine. I would encourage people to hop on there and check that out. But yeah, I think it applies to Amari and so many other of these defenders we're talking about. Where I 5 years ago, I mean, Amari Washington is the crown jewel of our defensive class. 5 years ago, Dakota Fields is the crown jewel. Now these guys are par for the course. And when you think about Washington specifically, or Mateo, or a Blake Purchase, or a Tuioti, when you think about who's surrounding them on the defensive line, I mean, you're not. Who are you double teaming? I mean, you got Harmon. If he has a one-on-one matchup, I love that. Caldwell, love that one-on-one. So Jordan Birch, love that one-on-one. I mean, he was probably one of the best run defenders in the country last year. So I think just in terms of the opportunities these guys are going to have, you see that with defensive linemen. Like, they want to play with other great defensive linemen because no one wants to be the guy getting double teamed by the center and guard every possession. So I think Amari's a great pick, but I think you'll see just like the depth early on. Like, I am so excited that the Idaho Boise State game to like watch those second string D linemen in the second half. Those guys are just like built differently than other dudes we've had on the line in the past.
Yeah, the depth that the Oregon coaches have built out across this roster kind of makes those first two games, and maybe even Oregon State too, the third game, some potential games to just watch for that development and see some of these younger guys get their first taste of college action. So that's going to be crucial for Oregon to really ultimately build out this two depth and figure out, even with some of these young guys, maybe some 2024 signees, true freshmen. Can this guy hang with someone from Idaho or Boise State or Oregon State? And how do they handle when they're being thrown in the fire and the speed of the college game? So I think we don't want to overlook some of those games. I think Idaho will probably okay to say that's a tune-up game, but Boise State's pretty quality every year. And we know that Oregon State's going to be ticked off and looking to shake some stuff up with all the conference realignment drama that has unfolded since that news broke. So rivalry games are always a fun time.
Well, and that's actually a perfect lead-in. I mean, we got a question on Twitter just about kind of scheduling, and if you see the Ducks scheduling any Power Four teams. They mentioned Alabama on here someday, and I think to your point on Boise and Oregon State, I think for me personally, like Boise and Oregon State are that perfect sweet spot where this isn't no cupcake. This is a real game. The other team's going to be up for it. They got dudes. We can't just walk in and like breeze through that environment. But at the same time, I'm not expecting those games to be particularly close when it comes to the third, fourth quarter where you're putting a loss in play. I've always been of the perspective, especially moving into the Big Ten, that like you're going to have ample opportunities with that schedule you're being given to prove whatever you need proven. I do not love the idea of that opener being scheduled, as fun as it is. I was at Auburn, against Oregon 2019 in Jerry World. I get why they're doing it. I get the recruiting piece and everything, and I get being in the Pac-12 then, the kind of reasons behind it. But I just think nowadays you need to be more strategic with the schedule you're signing up for. I mean, you're looking at ideally 15, 16 game season to where I just don't see the benefits of that like big time non-con game, especially to start off a season.
Exactly. Like, I don't think Oregon is envious of USC starting their season against LSU. Especially with, like you said, now that they're in the Big Ten, it's not like you're gonna have to battle that. Well, you don't play anybody during the year. Like, that's not going to be a problem for Oregon anymore. Even though the Pac-12 was awesome last year, I think that maybe Oregon found themselves, not to the same degree, but I think about my Zags, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and their basketball program, because they play in the Mountain West, in the West Coast Conference. Excuse me. They rely on the early season games and getting in some of those tournaments that have your Dukes, your North Carolinas, or those big name programs to ultimately boost their resume. But Oregon's gotten to the point where I don't think they need to do that.
Yep, 100%. Let's get to one more here from Twitter, and then maybe we can take a couple live. So if you guys got any live questions, feel free to pop them in there. We'll try to get to them in just a minute here. Who is an all-time under-the-radar Duck player that is memorable to you?
Ooh, that is a tough one. So I guess uh, if we're just talking about under the radar, what do you think, Travis? Like, is that just under the radar going into the season? They weren't being talked about that much, or maybe
I
nationally?
Yeah, I was just trying to think through like guys that maybe like outside of Oregon circles maybe didn't get a whole ton of like national chatter, but we loved them. I mean, like for me, I'm just trying to think about like my glory. I was in high school, early on in college, late 2000s. Like I just think about a guy like TJ Ward, um, who all of us just like loved. And he was part of that group that, um, built Oregon to the level they're at now. I think that like 2007 through 2010 group was a pretty like unheralded group in a lot of ways. I think you saw guy, we did not recruit at the level we do now. Those are 3-star, low 4-star guys that were some of the best Oregon teams ever. So for me, I think about a TJ Ward, I think about a Jeff Mail, like some of those guys that when the old replay comes on Pac 12 or Big Ten network now, I'm like, that was awesome.
Okay. Those are good answers for sure. A little bit before my time, I think. I didn't really start following Oregon until I got into high school. So I started high school in 2012. So definitely a lot of good players there. But if I'm even looking more recent than that, a couple players that come to mind, Kenai Benoit, the running back. I think he had some pretty big time plays for Oregon, and I don't think he went to the NFL, but he was a pretty solid running back for them in his time at Oregon. I think Charles Nelson is another one that was kind of a star at Oregon, even though he again didn't really have the NFL profile. He was definitely undersized, but he was one of those guys that you just wanted to get him the ball or get him on the field so he could impact things. I think he played a little bit of DB at one point in his Oregon career, and he was even involved in the return game a bit, if memory serves, Travis. So I think those are some of the ones that stand out to me. Andrew's talking about DJ Johnson playing defensive end and tight end. That was a good one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think about someone mentioned Avery Patterson in there too. I just think about that like run of safeties we had from Pat Chung to TJ Ward, Avery Patterson, Boyette, Eric Dargan, who would have been probably just when you were starting following. We just had this run of like awesome, hard hitting, like captain, command of the defense safeties that I think back on, especially as we've gone through this, feel like a little bit of a lull, Javon Holland not included at the safety position. So hopefully get back to that spot pretty soon here.
Really cool question. Captain Hiltz, his answers, John Boyette as an under the
Yep.
radar player. Verone McKinley, who Andrew said, that's another one of my favorite Ducks in recent years. Before we get any further, Travis, want to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors on the Ducks Dish podcast, which is Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your guys' dinner plans are today, but get on over to Ranchito Grill at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Haven't had lunch yet, so some ranchito does sound pretty solid right now. But Travis, let's keep it rolling here.
Yeah. Just a couple questions I saw in the chat a little bit earlier. I think one of them is good. I know you talked to a lot of recruits, so I feel like we both probably had some good insight here. How much does the result of a game matter on the recruiting visit? For example, if we lose a close game to Ohio State this year with an amazing environment, how negatively does that affect recruiting efforts for visitors?
This is an interesting one for sure because I think that with recruits, they're not so focused on the result as fans are. I think if Oregon loses a game that they should have won, I don't think that it's like, oh, I'm not considering that school anymore if I'm a recruit that's looking at Oregon. But in the same token, I think that if you have the situation like this one, right, in this hypothetical, you host the Buckeyes and you play them close and it's an amazing environment. I think a recruit could also look at that and say, man, that environment was electric. They were going haymaker for haymaker, and Oregon was right in there. till the very end and it just didn't go their way, or hey, you got to give Ohio State some props there. They played a hell of a game. I think that that's also a way that sometimes they're looking at this. And then it also depends on the opponent too, right? Ohio State's a preseason top 5 team, and they're going to be likely Oregon's biggest competition in the Big Ten. So I think if you're losing the game to a caliber of an opponent like that, it's not necessarily going to hurt you so much. But if you look at something that almost happened a couple of years ago when Oregon was struggling against Cal, if you lose that game, I feel like those are harder to answer to. And that can maybe take a little bit of wind out of your sails if you're a recruit looking at Oregon in that sense.
Yeah, and I'm guessing the one thing that I would assume you would agree with this. I think that while the holistic like win loss doesn't matter, I think environment is 10 times that. I think that specifically like position success within the game can matter. So, I worried in the Mario years, we would have some big time wide receivers come out and visit. And, we threw for 130 yards. And I'm like, oh boy, like, how are we going to sell that? So I think that that really can benefit you. You bring in a couple big time defensive edge, guys, and you see Mateo go out there and get 3 sacks in a scheme that'll fit you really well. It's like, yeah, that can matter a lot. So I think ultimately the win loss isn't super high up there, but I think that specifically like recruit to recruit, the success of that position group or like how they looked within the game, I do think that actually does matter.
It definitely does, because I think that goes back to, okay, you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? Are you about what you say? Are we seeing what you're selling us playing out in real time, or is it just a bunch of BS? Because yeah, I like what you said there about bringing in some big receivers and maybe not passing the ball as well. But Oregon's at a point, at least offensively, I think, where Will Stein has such a balanced attack that you're not really worried about that happening. I think you're going to see receivers, tight ends, running backs, all featured super prominently. You're going to see them get creative and get some of their offensive linemen out in space on like screenplays or something like that. So, fortunately for the Ducks, I don't think that I think they've been able to get to a point where they can navigate some hypothetical negative recruiting efforts if you do, or impacts, I should say, if you do lose a game.
Yep, yep, agreed. Let's pop through one more real quick here from Captain Hilt, which is, what are your thoughts on inside linebacker depth? Any freshmen that might make a decent contribution? I know we touched on this a little bit last week, but want to just run through that real quick.
Sure, sure. The inside linebacker position is definitely one that we're watching, because I think you're really, really close to having some clarity on your two deep there. Justin Jacobs, Jeffrey Bossa look like your solidified starters. Devin Jackson's the most likely candidate, I think, or the most sure candidate to be that third guy in your two deep on the inside at linebacker. But then who fills that fourth spot? I think there's a variety of names that you can watch. I think Jerry Mixon is one to watch. I don't know if he's technically considered a freshman. He might be a true sophomore. I don't know how many snaps he played, but of the freshmen, you're looking at Braden Platt, Kamar Matudi, who are both Adidas All-Americans, and then Dylan Williams as well, who was one of the top talents on the West Coast. I think we've heard a lot of good things about Braden Platt over the offseason, just that he's a dude and kind of an athletic freak. And the picture that B Mike posted the other day of the linebackers, I think was pretty cool, just to see all those guys together in one picture. Those ones are always cool, because you just think as a recruiting guy, like, wow, look at all these guys that they recruited in the same picture. And Braden Platt looks like he's just like a superhuman. Maybe he's going to be the next Jeff Bossa in terms of just a guy who's looking super shredded every time you see him. So I think Braden Platt's definitely there. And then one of the guys I heard about recently was Kamar Matudi. One of my sources was kind of telling me that it feels like a switch has maybe turned on for him in that linebacker spot, because he was another really big athletic freak. He played some running back in high school as well, and he led his league his junior year, I want to say it was, in tackles and rushing yards, which is just an insane stat, but it's one that I definitely kind of have memorized every time I talk about him.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely see Matudi and Platt get some run early in the year. I think they bring a little bit different skill sets. Platt's obviously that just like crazy, crazy athlete, got that track background. I'm guessing the adjustment, like game wise, might be a little more for him than it does for someone like Matudi. I think you'll see them both play early. I know Dylan Williams came in a little bit later. But just like with these other spots, I think you'll see all of injuries aside, I think you'll see all of them out there early in the year. You figure out, obviously linebacker is a position like you're in command of the defense. It's not like you can suddenly put a defensive lineman in charge. Like that's the linebacker's job. So I think beyond talent itself, you'll see that like command of the game, command of the defense. That's one of the biggest learning curves often. So I think that'll be tested early on, but I bet by the end of the year, we'll see at least one of those true freshman linebackers like being a contributor, not just in garbage time.
And that's the other good point too, Travis, that you mentioned about the communication, because you can be an all-world linebacker and have all the physical tools and all the athletic tools there, but if you can't get that defense aligned, if you can't process the in-helmet communication that they have now and all the signs coming in from the sideline, you're not going to see the field, because they're not going to put a guy out there that they can't trust to get that job done. So I think that's certainly an important factor to mention here when we're looking at some of these freshmen maybe ultimately seeing the field here in their first year. But I think that was all the questions we had time for today. Any final remarks, Travis, before we get out of here?
Oh man, just excited for next week. I know I'm going to do my annual kind of big season preview that's going to run on Scoop Duck, working through it right now. And then it sounds like me and you and probably one other guest of honor will be doing a kind of longer season type preview next week. So next week's game week, pretty crazy.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. We are just about back to the college football season, a little bit of week 0 action getting us going this weekend. But yeah, Travis, another great mailbag. Appreciate everybody that came out and joined us in the live stream. But do me a quick favor, you guys, if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe to the Scoop Duck YouTube channel, and share the show with your friends, family, and other Duck fans. And come and see us at Scoop Duck for the best in Oregon football and recruiting. We like to build a pretty nice community over there. Justin and I are active on the message boards, as are you, Travis. So it's a great time over there. No better time to join with football season kicking off here across the country. But until next time, thank you guys for talking some ball with us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.